inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
If you are brand new to rental property investing and you're trying to figure out how to get started and how to buy that first rental property, I wrote an ebook that'll show you exactly how to do it. You can download it right now. It's totally free. Just go to landlordgift.com. I've got a real interesting guest for you joining us on the podcast today. He's been investing for about 13 years, and over that time, he's done a couple of different approaches with managing his rental portfolio. He's self-managed with some help. He hired some staff to help him out, and he's also outsourced everything to a property manager. So I want to talk to him today about his evolution with managing rental properties and talk about some of the pros and the cons for different things that he's done to help you figure out what's the best way for you to manage your rentals. So let's take a real quick break. We'll come back in 60 seconds and we'll talk to Matt Faircloth from Trenton, New Jersey.
Would you like to know the easiest way to create wealth and passive income with real estate? This is Marco Santarelli with Norada Real Estate Investments. Now you can access the best deals without the stress or hassle of having to find, renovate, or manage those properties. We save you time by providing you with passive income investment properties in some of the best U.S. markets. Learn more by downloading your free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Passive Real Estate Investing. There's no obligation and nothing to buy. Simply visit passiverealestateguide.com and get your free copy today. That's passiverealestateguide.com.
The first step in buying a rental property is to get pre-qualified. And I would suggest you work with a lender that specializes in working with investors because you don't want to get to closing and find out the money's not there and you can't close. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's got a special offer just for our listeners. She's offering to waive all the pre-qualification fees if you mention Rental Income Podcast. Find out more today. Contact Chaley at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. Hey, Matt, welcome to the podcast. So why don't we start with you telling us just the quick Cliff Notes version on yourself and how you got started buying rentals?
Sure. First of all, Dan, thank you for having this. Thank you for having your show. Thank you for what you do for your audiences, and thank you for having me here. So
sure,
it's quite an honor to be here with you today.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk to you.
Thanks, you too.
Yeah.
So here's how I got started. I went to Virginia Tech, got a degree in engineering, and it's funny. I spent a lot of my life figuring out what I didn't want to do. And so I, got my degree in engineering, but then figured out I didn't want to be an engineer because I got my degree because people told me, hey, you're good at math and science. You should become an engineer as a kid. And I always was good at math and science. So I said, okay, great, I'll go be an engineer. But the problem with our kids these days is we don't tell them what professions actually look like when they step into them. Mm-hmm. And so I, got my degree in engineering, but realized, I actually don't want to do what an engineer does. And so I became a salesman. And I sold highly engineered product for years and did well, was happy, learned how to sell, which I think is a great thing to do. But then knew there was something more for me. Started dating a young lady that introduced me to Rich Dad Poor Dad, to the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I fell in love with it, read it twice, played his cash flow board game. Liked that young lady so much, I married her and became my wife, Liz. And her and I, while we were still dating, I started buying rental properties. I bought a house that I lived in, rented out, bought a house for $150,000, lived in one bedroom, rented it out to two buddies of mine that both paid me $500 a month. So I was making $1,000 in rent. And my mortgage was $940. So I was living there and making $60 living there for free.
That's the way to do it. Awesome.
So took it from there to quitting my day job about a year later when my wife and I got married, living off of her income. So we lived below our means, lived off of her income while I built our real estate business, and took it all the way up from there.
That is really incredible. So let's take a step back. So you were living with roommates, and basically you were living for free. Yeah, and that freed up your money because you're not paying a mortgage, you're not paying rent anywhere. Was that kind of when you were kind of a light bulb went off and you said, wow, this is really awesome. I'm living for free and I'm able to save money and start investing?
Yes. The light bulb went off in this moment. I was making a good salary as a, traveling sales rep, right? Living there for free. And in 2 years, I was able to pay off all my student loans, all my credit cards, all my back debts, and I was able to clean up my financial house. Now, I qualified for a mortgage in the house, just barely. Yeah, I did like a low money down FHA mortgage, but I was able to set aside a large coffers of savings for myself and pay off a ton of debt. That's when the light bulb went off.
That's awesome.
And I was like, man, this is amazing. This is creating real wealth for myself. And I still get my paycheck, and I can funnel all of it to my back creditors and my debt and pay all that stuff off. And so by the time I was like 27, I was pretty much debt free aside from my mortgage.
Incredible. That's great. So when did you buy your first actual rental?
Soon after,
Okay.
like we were hooked. We drank the Kool-Aid after that. So we took out a $30,000 loan from her father, and so he bankrolled us into. And this is this is like early 2000. This was back when you could do like a 5% down loan purchase on a rental property.
Mm-hmm.
So we were buying low money down, non-owner occupied, stated income, stated assets, rental property purchases, and again, that's like the in the subprime market world and everything like that. So we were able to figure that out. So we bought a duplex, fixed it up, and everything like that. That was our first non-owner occupied rental. We did that while we're still dating, and we ended up getting married soon after. And I quit my job, and then we built a portfolio in New Jersey soon after.
Yeah, so let's flash forward today. You have built over the years a huge portfolio. So tell me how many doors you own today.
Today, 2018, we have about 370.
That's incredible. Great job. And how many years did that take you?
It took us a bit. I mean, a lot of people that have been in business for as long as I have larger doors or more doors or whatever it is. It took us a while to get there. We've been in business for 13 years. But we built it up slow, and we enjoyed the small real estate stuff. Made some mistakes and also survived the crash. So we got started. A lot of real estate investors these days got in after the crash. Mm-hmm. We got in before the crash, so we actually know that this market actually does go down sometimes,
right?
And everything like that, because I experienced it myself in 2008. And so that slowed us down a little bit, but still, I mean, as you said, to be able to build to that point, I mean, don't get me wrong, I feel very blessed. But to build to where we're at in 13 years is impressive in some lights. Yes.
Now, having a portfolio the size of yours, I mean, management is so important. And you have really kind of figured out how to manage your portfolio. So I want to kind of take some time and kind of talk about the evolution of managing your portfolio. So when you first started, were you, with those first couple of doors, were you managing them yourself, or did you have a property manager?
Oh, I did everything in the beginning. I mean, obviously, where I lived, I did that. I managed that duplex in Philadelphia. I managed, we built up to about 30 units in Trenton on our money. Not on our money, on my back of managing. We didn't hire anybody till I got to about 30 units. So I did all the showings. I did collections. I did, running around to meet handymen, running around to meet maintenance guys, running around to buy new purchases. So I would go to closing, and then right after that, go show an apartment and everything. So there was a lot of running around and a lot of doing, but I figured out the day-to-day management side of it, and I think that it made me that much stronger of a asset manager and a property owner, because I've done all the management stuff myself, and I can actually teach a few things to some property managers on things that work, things that don't.
So you're working full time and you're managing one property, which probably isn't that much work for you. Two probably isn't much work. And then you start building your portfolio. Did it get to a point where there were times when it was really stressful, where you maybe had a lot of turnovers all at the same time, or a bunch of maintenance stuff coming up?
Sure. It was stressful a lot of the time. I mean, just managing property, or just being a property owner or managing real estate or whatever, can be hands off at times, but a lot of the time, real estate can be needy. It needs things, it needs your attention, and it needs either someone's attention in a property manager, or it needs you if you're doing it yourself. and everything like that. So yeah, sure, it can be, especially if you've got a couple of units vacant at a time, which can really pull down your cash flow, and you still got to find the money to renovate the apartments anyway. So yeah, those are some of the things that stresses. I mean, a lot of times it's just, lack of income. What will stress you in real estate, and the way to get your income up is you've got to invest money in the property.
Right,
So that can
right.
become the problem right there.
Were there any software that you were using back then to help you manage the properties, or anything you were doing to help you stay organized?
Yeah. So back then we used a software called Rent Manager, which is a full online portal. It was less robust then than it is now. We switched over to something called AppFolio, which is even more robust. But it collects rents for you. It back then it didn't, but then you have to go physically collect the rent and then enter it into the system when you received it. It would run P&Ls for you. It would run bank statements for you, and tenant records and everything like that, and produce work orders. So Rent Manager did all that. AppFolio does it even more robustly. Rent Manager, I believe, has an online service now. But for the most part, that's the software we did for running the finances and the rental income and stuff like that for our properties.
Okay. And then when it started to become overwhelming that you couldn't work full time and manage all the doors, instead of hiring a property manager, you hired an employee. Why did you go that route versus just outsourcing everything to a manager?
Well, it's interesting because where we were, our portfolio, we had about 30 doors at the time that we hired out. And that was all in Trenton, New Jersey. At that time, there was no viable property manager that I trusted any further than I could throw them in the Trenton marketplace. That's changed because this was like 2010 that we hired out. But at that point, I didn't trust anybody, so I really didn't have a choice.
Okay.
Additionally, I was able to hire someone for less than what the management fee would have been. The management fee typically is somewhere between like 6 and 10%, right? So I was able to hire an employee for less than that 10%.
Okay.
And so that made sense to do at the time. Okay.
So,
go ahead.
All right. So what did that employee do? That first employee you hired?
Just a bookkeeper.
Okay.
She was a bookkeeper, and one out of necessity because my wife was keeping our books, and my wife is awful at keeping books. And God love her, but there's other things that she is good at. But keeping financial books and stuff like that was not the best. Was not her best skill set, so I needed to get her out of that. For my marriage, and also for my wife's sanity, right, and for the health of our company, I needed to get that off the plate. But then I was just get somebody who was good at it, who knew how to run books and knew how to run rental property income and profit and loss statements. It made sense, and so that's why we hired out. But also, I think that bookkeeping is one of the first things that landlords should sub out. And everything like that. I mean, there's a hierarchy in subbing things out as landlords. I think the first thing is a bookkeeper. The second thing is maintenance, for doing the handyman repairs and stuff like that. Even if they're doing it themselves, even if landlords, some of your listeners, are doing the work themselves, they should eventually look to hand that off to a third party handyman company, and eventually an in-house employee once you get enough doors.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that the bookkeeper was your first hire, because with, I understand for your marriage that was a good a good way to go, but was there enough work on a daily basis to keep her busy at first?
It wasn't a full-time position. We didn't hire full-time.
Okay.
It wasn't a full-time position.
Okay.
So that's what that's great about a bookkeeper is typically a bookkeeper has a bunch of clients that they work for, especially if it's a third-party company. But this bookkeeper was in-house. I mean, I paid her on a salary, but she was a semi-retired professional.
Okay.
And so she ended up, she was only looking for 10 to 15 hours a week.
Right. Okay.
And I think that you as in your listeners could either find a third party company that you pay, that's just a vendor to you that's willing to do a fractional role of their time, or you can find someone, put an ad out there and find someone who's partially retired or has a few companies that they work for or whatever, or even ask your CPA if your CPA has somebody in house or somebody they recommend that can do your books, because a lot of times bookkeepers are not looking for full-time gigs. They're looking for a couple of companies they can work for on a regular basis.
Right.
It's rare to find a company that needs a full-time bookkeeper.
Yeah. Yeah, but that is an important job because just keeping track of receipts and making sure everything's recorded properly and in your accounting software. I mean, that's not fun to do, and I could see why that was
beyond
an
that. We
thing.
had her paying bills, like cutting checks and stuff like that to vendors, receiving rents. So if she wasn't in for a couple of days, the rent would just sit there in a lockbox until she got in, and she would process all of it, put it in the system. So we had her running a lot of our financials. Now on the check writing side, this is back before a lot of people were using ACH and stuff like that. She would just print the checks and I would sign them. And so that was a check and balance to where she didn't have signing authority.
Right,
she wasn't able to send a check to anybody. And now with ACH and online payments, I can just click buttons and approve it. Once the payment's been set up, I can approve it and it gets fired off. So you can still have checks and balance, but you can give somebody access to your financials without giving them the potential to rob you.
Right. Totally. Totally. So then your next hire then was a handyman that was able to turn units over, take care of repairs. Did that save you a lot of money by not having to call contractors anytime something came up?
Well, yeah, because a contractor, there's handyman companies in my part of the world that charge between $50 and $70 an hour for a fairly seasoned handyman to drive over there with a truck with all his stuff that he needs on it and walk in your property and pretty much fix whatever you got. Okay. Doing it in-house allowed me to pay somebody $20 an hour, $25 an hour. And I still got that same truck. I still got all the tools that he needed on it. And I still got him being able to figure most of it out. And if he couldn't, then it was his job to go call a third-party vendor and negotiate a deal with them to come in and fix it. And then he would go and check it behind them. That said, you need enough units to maintain the workload and the salary for that guy. So it was not at 30. It was more like 60.
Okay.
60 doors that we got to before it made sense financially to hire a maintenance guy.
Okay. And then as you were still growing your portfolio, you're adding more and more units. Who is your next hire? Who did you bring on to help you out after the handyman?
So the bookkeeper that I had, who had at this point, worked her way up to being pretty much my office manager. She was my right hand that did everything for me. They did a lot of my financial stuff. So she was cutting all the checks. She eventually earned up to having check signing authority once I developed several years worth of trust with her. She paid all my invoices, received all my rents, and had other responsibilities for holding projects accountable and stuff like that. Beyond that, the real third party was somebody to take the rest of my role off my plate. And I was still, the office manager was doing all the financial stuff, but she still wasn't collecting rents. She wasn't showing apartments. She wasn't receiving maintenance calls. Right. She wasn't being the liaison between the company and the tenant. And that was the third person that the next party that we put in. And they were responsible for, if the tenant had paid their rent late, that's a communication that has to go from the company to the tenant. If the tenant has a maintenance issue, that's a relationship between the tenant and the company. And they handled all that communication. The tenants got to know that person better than they got to know me.
Yeah.
Because before that, I could show you my cell phone. I had freaking 50 tenants that all have my cell phone number,
Right.
And it's very hard to grow that way. So that I was able to transition all that over to this this individual that came in and got a job working for my company as a property manager. And at that point we were just over 100.
Okay.
And that made sense for him to step in and do the role and do all the tenant interactions that I didn't want to focus on anymore.
So up to 100 units, you were taking all the calls, basically? That was your job to deal with
maintenance calls, setting up work orders, making all the collections calls, doing lease renewals, doing lease signings, stuff like that. I delayed a bit. I probably should have got it done sooner, and everything. And this was all happening while there was still not a good viable option to manage a third party property manager in Trenton. There is now, and I actually just handed off management of my entire portfolio off to a third party vendor because a company I have high regard and high trust for moved into Trenton in June.
Okay.
And they manage some of my other properties. They manage, full disclosure, they manage assets that I have in Pennsylvania. And so I already knew them. And I kind of, said, listen, you guys should really consider coming to New Jersey because there's nobody over here doing what you guys do the way you do it. And so they stepped into Trenton and they went from 0 to 500 units under management in 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now
they don't own any of that stuff. They manage all of it, right? But that just goes to show you the gap that exists in that market.
Yeah.
In that. But we only got up to about 120 units of management when I was doing it. And I can tell you that it's hard. You can't have a profitable management company. Most of those units were mine. We were still taking a management fee. It's hard to profit in property management at, in the low 100s in management. And I would tell that to your audience is that, if you want to build a business and be a property management company, consider building it big enough that you can afford to pay enough payroll. And I think that doesn't really kick in until you get up to like 20, like maybe 200, 300, 400 doors somewhere in there.
Were you like when you handed it off to a property management company? Was it hard? Because I'm sure you had systems and you had a certain way that you ran things, and now you're giving it over to a property management company that probably isn't doing it the same way that you would do it. Was that hard to let go of everything?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, it was very refreshing. But there needed to be a level of trust that I had for them that, I've been working with them for a while. I've seen how they operate. I know they got their act together. And if I don't like something, they're open to feedback and they're willing to change. And so I think that was probably two of my biggest stipulations. Another stipulation is that they have in-house maintenance. And I'll say this to your listener base, that if you guys are vetting property management companies and you're looking at a property management company that doesn't have a third party in-house, doesn't have in-house maintenance, then I would consider looking elsewhere. This company did. They had a lot of that, and they had more scale than I did. So, to my point, Dan, is it was very refreshing.
Yeah.
In leveraging the scale of their company, that was refreshing. The frustrations, I was willing to let it go. I mean, again, they don't do things the way that I did, and I just needed to be okay with that in exchange for freeing up my time.
Right. Now, if you could go back in time and this company maybe was in your market years ago, would you have given up the management earlier, or do you think you would have done it the same way that you did it? Like, say, if this company was in my marketplace, I would have given it up earlier. When
Absolutely.
do you think you would have done it? Like at when you were hiring that first bookkeeper back at about 30 properties, would you have handed it over at that point?
Yep.
Okay.
That's what I would have done it, because now I've got not that I don't, I've built this brand that requires having an office manager, and I've built a system that requires that, and now it's not as necessary. And I think that I could run a little bit leaner if I didn't have this certain overhead there. I probably could outsource her role completely and have a property manager doing a lot of what they do.
Right.
And I know, again, I probably would have been able to build up faster. So if there is a property manager in your network, I would consider outsourcing to them.
Would you do it?
But I wouldn't outsource to property man. I'm sorry, what?
I was going to say, like, do you still think that at the beginning you should manage yourself to kind of learn how everything works? I
strongly, that's what I was, you read my mind anyway. Okay. That's what I was going to say. I strongly recommend that people manage themselves as they get started. And I know nobody wants to do it because management stinks and they don't want to deal with it, and they don't want to talk to tenants, and they don't want to, but I can tell you that if you commit to managing for your own properties for the first 2 years, you will become that much better of a property owner. You'll know your real estate much better. It's not going to because real estate ownership, even with a property management company, is not a hands-off activity. It's something that requires your attention, or the wheels will come off, or the property won't get run as well, or you'll start seeing a lot more vacancy and wonder wonder why, and you'll go out there and realize, oh, I'm seeing vacancy because the grass is 3 feet high, and my property manager wasn't taking care of this, and I thought they were,
Right.
And so you can't take your eye off the ball even if you're not managing it. And so I think that in managing it yourself, you learn what matters and what doesn't. You learn how to properly manage, and it'll allow you to be a better interviewer of potential management companies that you want to work with.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think managing at the beginning is so important. Well, Matt, tell us what you're doing today. So you have written a book about raising private money. That's the latest thing you're working on.
I wrote a book called Raising Private Capital, and it's pretty much everything I know about raising private capital, and about how to assemble private lenders, private investors, private equity, joint ventures, how to assemble those types of deals, how to exit from them, and most importantly, how to find people in your own immediate network that potentially have an interest in working with you. To learn how to read the tea leaves, and to how to sniff people out and find them even in places you didn't think they existed and stuff like that. So like I said, it's the tools that I've used, things I've learned in the years of building a real estate company, doing a lot of the work that we do with third party money, with private money, with people with IRAs, or with people with just straight cash, putting it into my deals. So we built a lot of it with private capital, and this book is everything I've learned and the best practices on how to do so.
And so private capital is how you got to where you are today. You probably wouldn't have been able to get so many units if you weren't an expert at raising private money, right?
So, Dan, we have 10 times our portfolio because of private money.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So take that into your audience too, is that private money allows you to exposure to way larger deals that you couldn't touch with a stick if you didn't have access to other people's capital. But that's what private money does, is it gives you access to bigger opportunities, and it gives your investors, the people that invest with you, access to returns associated with real estate that have nothing to do with other investment vehicles like Wall Street or elsewhere. They can get exposed to the real estate returns that they couldn't otherwise, because they don't have the time or the wherewithal to run around and invest like we do.
Right. Well, if someone wants to check out the book or learn more about you, what's the best way for someone to find you?
Pretty simple. We've got it all on my website, derosagroup.com. That's DEROSA group.com, derosagroup.com. You'll see we have a very vibrant YouTube page. You'll see that there. You'll see a link to the book. If people want to hear more about what we have investment wise, you can learn about that there too. And you can learn a bit about some uniqueness that we have with our company, including giving a small chunk of what we make back each month as an asset company, not of people's returns, but we do a give back program called DeRosa Gives. And everything like that. Out of our proceeds that we make on deals, we give a chunk of that out to charity each month.
If you want to check out everything Matt just mentioned, his YouTube channel, his book, his website, I've got links to everything on my website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 189. Thank you so much for listening. If this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe and you'll get new interviews with inspiring landlords delivered to you every single Tuesday. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.